You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتلمين هناك لشوارزنيجر.
Pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hacen. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Kevin, I have a question for you.
Go ahead, Duane.
I've been watching a lot of the highlights of LeBron James coming off the plane yesterday, holding the NBA title trophy.
Yeah.
Is that thing uglier than the Gold Cup?
It is. It's one of the worst trophies I've ever seen. And did you know that it's Tiffany's that makes it too? So for some reason, I think it's the only piece of jewelry they ever got wrong.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know what? I was looking at the MLS Cup the other day, too. It's floating around Portland, a lot of places out there. It's not really that attractive. It's big and bulky, and, like, I get that, but it's kind of like those handles are, like, they're weird. They're, like, kind of glued on strangely.
It's funny you're talking about trophies because I had that conversation yesterday with David Foote, which was on the show yesterday. We talked about, like, the U.S. Open trophy on Sunday from the golf, and these old golf trophies that look like real metal that has wear to it. It's been battered, bruised, but it's just been put back together. It has a certain aura. It has a soul. Those other shiny trophies just seem so fake to me.
When I was in England, I saw the Ashes trophy once, and you know the Ashes is the famous match competition between Australia and England in cricket. It's tiny. It's crazy. It's so the Ashes it's Ashes and a little thing, and it's epic. It's one of the greatest trophies in the world because it's not so much how big and bulky the damn thing is. It's about the history and the tradition behind it. But anyway, I was just that NBA trophy's awful, and I just saw it on my TV screen as we were coming on air, and it made me think of the Gold Cup, which was not really the most attractive thing either. There seems to be a CONCACAF thing to just make it bigger, right?
Yeah, big shiny trophy that's gold. It's like the CONCACAF Champions League trophy. It's huge. It's impressive in a way, but it's not that. It doesn't tickle my fancy in a way. It doesn't get my blood pumping. I'm like, oh, look at this trophy. No, it's for me. First of all, it has to be silver. A trophy that's gold, it just seems too brash for me. I don't know, but the silver trophy that has some wear to it. Just think about the Claret Jug. Think about the U.S. Open Championship in golf. Think about the Stanley Cup. Think about those old trophy. Yeah, those are a little something for me.
Yeah, the World Cup trophy itself is actually, if you take it back and just aesthetically look at it, it's kind of a weird looking thing too. It's gold as well, so that maybe speaks to that. All right, that's my trophy conversation for today. The highly important stuff, I think, but we probably should move on to talk about a big game that's happening tonight. The big game that I think that what is it? The United States of America, yeah, and they're playing. Who is it? What's the team they're playing?
They're playing Argentina and Lionel Messi tonight in the semifinal of the Copa Centennial Cup.
Oh, that seems like it might be a tough one, eh?
Yes, it does. Do the U.S. have a chance? There's always a chance, Duane. It's sport. It happens in a surface, and there's always a chance of anything happening. But it's going to be a tough one tonight.
Yeah, you should really get clipped. You played the I Believe song there in the background, which gets in my head all day. So thanks for that. We should really get going is a clip of the Jim Carrey famously saying, "So you're saying there's a chance," because we often talk about that very idea. So you're saying there's a chance, but there was an interesting perspective that's being debated within U.S. soccer circles in the sort of usual kind of back channel places that these things get debated, and that's whether the U.S. should be considered an underdog tonight. And the consensus that is coming out of U.S. circles is that the U.S. is not the favorite, but they're not an underdog either. And I wonder what you think of that. Is that a fair way to put it? Is the U.S. not an underdog, but not the favorite as well?
Well, you can't say that they're underdog in this match. Yes, I do believe so because of, well, the history of Argentina and the fact that they were runner-up in the World Cup 2 years ago. That's something impressive in its own. It's a very similar type of team. A couple of changes here and there, but the core is the same. With the injuries of the U.S. men's national team and the suspensions, Bobby Woodley is not going to be there tonight. Same for I forget his name, but anyways, injuries and suspensions tonight.
Jermaine Jones.
Exactly, Jermaine Jones. I should have known, right? Jermaine Jones and suspensions go hand in hand usually. But this game tonight, it's all those factors. But the United States have their back against the wall, and that proverbial "we're gonna fight until the end," it comes out in those type of games. And I do expect a Clint Dempsey to play out of his mind, trying to take this team on his shoulder and go further than they thought. And right now, they are further than everybody expected. So for me, well, at least I expected. So for their presence in the semifinals, it's still it's a tournament victory for them, in my opinion. Already, it's bonus from here on out.
Yeah, look, I will fully admit, and this is completely in sincerity, what I'm about to say. The "I believe that we will win" chant is incredibly charming, and it's what's good about the U.S. National team and the U.S. as a country. They do ultimately believe in themselves. They believe in themselves in a way that's reassuring to anyone else, because the rest of the world has doubts. There's no other place in the world that "I believe that we will win" when you're playing Argentina would be something that people would be embracing. There's no other country in the world that, if they were in the U.S. situation, would be talking about them not being underdogs against Argentina. Of course, they're underdogs against Argentina. However, the American spirit comes through, and I think that that's something that they should celebrate. It's something that I wish that other places that I'm more associated with, that would be Canada, would take that a little bit more and would have a little less of the knock it down, rather they bring it up rather than knock it down. I wish that was a little more of the case up here. How do the U.S. win this game, though? That is an interesting question. That is a tactical question. If we take our step away from any sort of emotional attachment to this game, it becomes difficult to sort of understand how, particularly with Wood out and with Jones out, that this is a way that they could win. Kevin, how would you approach this if you're the U.S.? 11
men behind the ball.
See,
3 guys on Messi. Park the bus, and your sidecar is directly on Messi to make sure that he doesn't win the game by himself. That being said, you cannot put your focus solely on Messi. So in a way, you have to play very defensively and use a counter, which has been an effective tool for the U.S. men's national team over the last international tournaments. If they use that counter, they might have 1 or 2 opportunities in this game. That's it. But they have to bury it. It's now or never. If they do, they'll give themselves at least a chance defensively to hold on and get to that result. And the more the game goes on, yes, the more Argentina has chances to score goals. The last thing U.S. men's national team want to do is bring this game in extra time, in overtime, and then in penalties. The longer this game goes, cream rises to the top. Argentina has a better shot of winning. If it's only 90 minutes, the U.S., with their 1 or 2 opportunity probably in this game, if they bury those opportunities, then they can have a shot.
The reporter Juan Orengo, who many people will know, he covers a lot of the Spanish issues down there. He's American-based. He's been covering this tournament throughout. He actually saw the U.S. training and tweeted out a formation that he was noticing was sort of getting what looked like starters treatment in that training session.
5-5? 1-5-5?
Well, actually, it's kind of an interesting lineup. I'm going to read it out here, too. Now, keep in mind that we don't know, and they might have been trying to do some maybe Klinsmann's playing tricks, too, by putting a starting lineup out in training in the hopes that Argentina might see it or it might leak out. There's all sorts of sort of mind games that take place here, but nonetheless, it's an interesting thought exercise. Obviously, Guzan is in goal. The back line, Yedlin, Cameron, Brooks, Johnson, so that's not that surprising. But I like this midfield. This midfield's quite interesting. Zuzi, Beckerman, and Bradley. So it appears that if you have those 3 there, like, where is Bradley? Is Bradley behind them? Is he in front of them? Where is he playing? That's always the question with Michael Bradley. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Pulisic, the young kid, he was getting starting minutes with Dempsey and Zardes on the other side. So that actually is a pretty damn aggressive lineup when you look at it, because that's not really a bus park. That could be an aggressive sort of get ahead, get on the front foot, attack kind of lineup, which surprises me a little bit, Kevin.
Yes, it does surprise me too. So that's why I think that your preamble before you said this, that it might be trolling. You might be right, because you don't want to give your formation away, your roster composition as well. But I do believe the U.S. men's national team tonight will parking the bus. I don't necessarily like that expression because you can play defensively with a eye towards the front with a cutting edge pass that launches one of your strikers. You can still do that when you're playing defensively. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that their focus will be not to lose the ball in a fashion that gives Argentina a direct look on goal. Composed in itself, really relax and give the ball small passes, move it forward, control the tempo. Because if you don't, Argentina will, and that will put the U.S. men's national team on tilt. And that's what's dangerous about this game is they have to control the game. If they don't, Argentina will, and then it's just a question of time.
Keep in mind that there is no extra time in the games other than unless it goes to the final, they go straight to penalties. This is something FIFA's trying out. We saw that in the Peru-Colombia game in the quarterfinals, that it goes straight to the penalty kicks. I don't really like that. However, that is the case. They're tweaking this to see how it works out in this tournament. But so the U.S. might view, the ability to defend for 90 minutes and then win that. I don't like calling it a lottery because it's not, but win the skill competition of a penalty shootout might be their best chance to win this game. So maybe that's might be part of their thinking heading into this. I talked about Bradley real quickly there, and we'll lead into this. And then we have a great interview that I pre-recorded just before the show with Kurt Larson of the Toronto Sun about the Euro. He's over in France right now, and we talked a few TFC issues, and we talked about Michael Bradley as well. These Soccer Today questions today has Michael Bradley regressed in Major League Soccer with Toronto FC? This is a long-standing point of contention with the Americans abroad crowd out there. I don't know how many American Broads folks listen to us, but if you're out there, you know this one. You think that this has hurt the U.S. national team's chances to have Bradley come back to Major League Soccer. It's a debate that we see for more players than Bradley, but we certainly have seen it especially with Bradley because, he was with Roma, and then he came back to TFC, and, it's not even an MLS team in the U.S. There's a lot of frustration around that. So my question was whether he'd regressed, and it's pretty tight right now, about 100 votes at when we went up to broadcast today, and it was 53% of the respondents had said that, yes, Michael Bradley had regressed with TFC. 47% had said no. He might have just regressed on his own accord. He's 28 now. He's still younger than people think. But anyway, it's
just the look of him being bald. That's just the Bradley look. It's not his fault. It's not the Michael look. It's the Bradley look.
Yes, exactly. The Michael Bradley, Michael Jordan, you get that. But,
more the Bob Bradley look that Michael is carrying on. That was
exactly. All right. It was because Michael Jordan was bald too, so that's where I came for that. But what are your thoughts? Does MLS regress players, Kevin?
Well, statistically speaking, no. When you look at Michael Bradley's statistics, either the goals played, the amount of goals he scored with the amount of apparition for Toronto, 62, 7 goals scored, is a bigger ratio than he had in Roma or Kiev before, or all those places. He played. And I do believe that he's not necessarily regressing. It's a different role that he has with Toronto FC than with the U.S. men's national team. It's not necessarily the only thing I could say he regressed, he's not used to playing versus a more tactical type of opponent, but more of a strength and athleticism based maybe sometimes. But even then, that's changing a lot. And I think it's MLS now. It's slowly migrating towards a type of soccer where you do have that fraction of a second more, and he can actually be even more useful. So that being said, the only way I can see the regression of Michael Bradley is if you look that way, but then it shows maybe preconceived ideas of what MLS is or what it's becoming and what it will be in the 2-3 months, because ebb and flows of the game itself, the league is constantly evolving. So maybe there's that aspect to it. Maybe he hasn't regressed. Maybe we just think the league is still not where it's supposed to be, or we're not evaluating the league as we should because we have maybe preconceived notion of the retirement league. I think it has gone a long way, and Michael Bradley, I don't think has regressed because of the league itself or because of TFC. I think it's just the different type of soccer that he's playing, and he's just showing those qualities.
It does go to this debate. The fact that it still rages on, 3 years into this, does speak to an inherent situation with Major League Soccer. And I often say that it is simultaneously the most over and underrated league in the world, because there are people out there that think MLS is much further along than it is. They think that MLS teams could compete, with the great teams in Europe. Some people out there, and it's silly. It really is. I mean, they need to compete with Mexico first, guys. And although there have been blips here and there, Kevin's backyard being one, generally speaking, they're not consistently competing with the Mexican teams on a game-in, game-out basis. So until they get there, you're certainly not going to be talking about Barcelona anytime soon, right? However, there's also this other side that think it's quote-unquote a pub league or a retirement league. It's equivalent of the conference in England. You hear that kind of attitude. That's generally not North Americans that say that. However, this Bradley debate does illustrate that there are some haters out there still that don't like Major League Soccer. And we all, the going beyond the soccer wars stuff, just people that don't rate the league, that aren't inclined to, scream about Pro L and stuff, but they're out there. And I think that that's, the other side of that argument, the underrated side, because it's somewhere in the middle. The nuance is there. Nuance is not something that lends itself to sports radio. So I forgive myself for trying to have a nuanced conversation here, but that's the case with it.
No, yep, exactly. It's a combination of many different factors. The how you evaluate Bradley and his effectiveness with the team. Does it help his effectiveness with U.S. men's national team? It's all a question of bias. You have to look on the field, what he's doing with the team, and the team is performing well. So right now, I have to say that for me, Michael Bradley hasn't regressed since he's been in MLS.
All right. Let's take a quick break now, Kevin, and come back with that pre-recorded interview with Kurt Larson of the Toronto Sun, and then we'll come back and maybe we'll open the lines up and have the rest of our show at that time, Kevin.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back to Soccer Today. Duane Rollins along with the Toronto Sun's Kurt Larson. Kurt, thanks for taking some time today.
No problem, man.
Kurt's over in France right now, has been providing great coverage for the Toronto Sun over there the entire tournament so far. So, Kurt, let's just start with this. You've been over there for a while now. Just what's your general observation about the overall quality of this tournament so far? Are you liking what you're seeing?
I mean, it just depends on what you like. I mean, I think a lot of times people get sucked into the whole romantic side of the game when they watch the Champions League and they in the Premier League even, and they figure this is what, soccer should be about every single match, and otherwise it's not worth watching. But, in a tournament like this, we see at the World Cup, we see at the Euro, it's different brands of soccer, different ways about going about building your 11 players and doing what you can to progress at a tournament. So, I mean, it really depends on what you like. There's a certain beauty, I think, in a lot of the defensive schemes we see here with lesser-known teams and smaller sides trying to get through the knockout phase. And I think you have to appreciate it for what it is. Although, if you ask anybody, some people don't want some of the smaller sides included in this tournament. But I think they're full money here.
So you think the 24 teams was a good decision to expand it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems is that you're going to have teams get through this group stage that have maybe only won one game or even are on 3 points, actually. So that's one of the challenges in a 2014 tournament is you might have one or two teams slip through that probably don't deserve to go through. But at the same time, I don't think anybody here has really been blown out aside from maybe Turkey in that Spain game. And that last night, Slovakia didn't even really want to play against England because they knew a draw would get them through. But if you look at the games and the balance of play and the results, I think 24 teams has been a good idea.
Let's turn our attention to some specific teams that you've seen play over there. I know you've seen Spain play. They've impressed me the most. Do you think this is a team that can get back to their glory days of the 3 consecutive major championships?
I think so, but the strange thing is that when you watch Spain play, you don't really know exactly how good they are or how good or how complete they are, because you look at a team like Turkey who takes them on last week, and Turkey just wants to sit back, defend with 4 across the back and then 5 across midfield, and they're not even interested in getting forward. In my opinion, a team like Turkey has enough talent that they can probably, put a few numbers forward, put some pressure on Sergio Ramos and PK and these guys and see what they're all about. But instead, they elect to sit back, and when you sit back on Spain, that's their game, and they're going to pick you apart. That said, Spain's one of the few teams at this competition, maybe the only team that I've seen, can take advantage of a side that's just trying to defend, that's not interested in playing. We saw England against Slovakia. They couldn't do it. Germany struggled against Poland. They couldn't break down a team that was sitting back. So in that sense, I think Spain has so far looked the best and most complete side of the tournament, although we haven't seen somebody put them under pressure.
You also saw England and Wales play. That was probably England's best game. I don't think there's probably, but it was their best game. Obviously, they struggled yesterday. What's your general observation of this English team? Do you think they can get past the quarterfinals, or is that, as usual, their high water mark here?
I mean, I think when you're looking at Roy Hodgson's job and the FA's expectations, I think making a quarterfinal is probably the minimum requirement at this point, especially after finishing second in that group. And they could play the Portugal in the next round. But observations, I mean, it's a side that I think is lacking an Iniesta, somebody who, when things are tight, when things are late and things are close, that can really take it upon himself to break a team down with a pass, or even a player that can take a player on. I mean, we saw during that Slovakia game that there was no one really interested in trying to break somebody down by themselves. And in moments where the game's tight and things are compact, you got to have a player that's special enough to provide that one moment. It's really the same old thing for England. They're all about pace. Roy Hodgson even said last night that he's more interested to see how this team looks against a Portugal or a France, because he thinks playing against those sides might even be easier for England because of how the game will be more open. I think we saw in those 3 games, England struggled to create chances from the run of play. I mean, really, for me, they've scored just 1 goal from the run of play. Because I'm not really giving that one to Vardy for the head back that he scored off of.
The group winner, of course, was Wales. And if you look at the superstars in this tournament, they've struggled with one exception, Gareth Bale, who has been outstanding for Wales in this tournament. Is his play enough to be able to maybe make Wales one of those dark horses to do something really special?
Personally, I don't think so. I mean, full disclosure here, I only watched Wales against England. Of course, the game last night wasn't on national TV. They elected to play the England-Slovakia game instead, so I didn't get a chance to see Wales versus Russia. But part of me thinks that Wales has benefited from, first of all, shoddy goalkeeping. If you look at the Slovakia game and the England game, the free kicks Bill scored on were a product of that. And then I think last night they just ran into a Russian team that wasn't the slightest bit interested in this tournament anymore, because in my opinion, Russia has a lot more to offer and a lot more, should be a lot more stingy than they were last night. But, it's going back to the star angle that you mentioned. Gareth Bale has certainly been, high above everybody else. But, I'm not sure Cristiano Ronaldo has been disappointing. He's been excellent except for scoring. And there's Zlatan Ibrahimovic, the poor guy, hasn't really been able to produce anything, because I think the Swedes are just really lacking any kind of talent after him. But, no, I mean, we'll see what happens in the next round. Personally, the Group B with Wales and England and Slovakia, I can't see any of them getting past the quarterfinals at this point.
You mentioned Ronaldo. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on Portugal, whether or not they're going to be able to overcome their early hiccups to perhaps win that group in the final stage.
If there is one player at this tournament that I think can do it single-handedly, can win a match single-handedly, I think it's probably Cristiano Ronaldo. The way he was able to take over the Austria game, the way he has created so many chances and just come up short. I thought he was fantastic against Austria, and his ability to create chances for himself, and just really was unlucky on the night. In terms of Portugal as a team, I'm not sure they have the horses in midfield to make a deep run of this tournament. I think they're fully capable of getting past England in the next round, or getting into a quarterfinal at least. But everything I've seen is that Portugal is very much a one-man team. But the fact remains that one player is capable of great things whenever he steps on the pitch.
In a general way, have you seen any teams that make you think that they could be this year's version of a 204 Greece? Is there a dark horse out there that you think could step up and perhaps win the tournament or make a final?
Not from what I can see. I still think the Germans are going to come good eventually, and I still think Spain is going to make a deep run at this tournament. The one thing you could say is that France maybe is going to benefit from playing at home, because I actually don't think the French have been all that good. But are going to be okay in the long run. If I was just going to give you an out of nowhere kind of prediction, man, I don't know. I mean, you could probably say Poland just because of the way that they performed against Germany and were so good defensively and have Lewandowski going forward, so probably capable of stealing a result against somebody. But even then, I don't think Poland making a deep run to a semifinal or final with the prize many teams based on how they competed in qualifying and the expectations coming in.
Unfortunately, one of the talking points of the start of this tournament has been crowd behavior. The Russians in particular. We saw the Croatian fans as well. The English fans got into a little bit there. You've written quite a bit on this. Just from your perspective on the ground there, are they starting to get this under control? Do you think that we might be able to turn our attention to the field and forget about this crowd stuff, especially now that the Russians are out?
I think so. I mean, at least the serious side of things, along with the Russians leaving this tournament, I think their hooligans go with them. There was a report over here today that 300 Russian ultras were actually stopped on their way to wherever England played last night. I believe it might have been Lyon. So there's the reports out there that maybe they're still trying to stir up some trouble. But, ever since that first weekend in Marseille, everything's kind of quieted down a bit. I think the next storyline is going to be the Croatians and whether or not they continue to act up and how UEFA handles that, because at this point they're starting to threaten federations with ticket bans and stuff like that, and it might be the only way to actually solve this problem is to make certain teams play in front of none of their own fans.
Let's turn our attention a little bit to your regular bread and butter. You were able to make a TFC report yesterday. Sampdoria had been reported to make an inquiry into Michael Bradley, TFC. That, of course, created the whole debate that we often see in the Americans abroad community, where a lot of people want to see Michael Bradley go back to Serie A, to somewhere in Europe, because they feel that he's regressed in TFC. Let's just address that. First off, I think that you reported quite accurately that there's nothing there in terms of selling him, but yeah. Has Michael Bradley regressed, in your opinion?
I mean, I don't think so. And I mean, it's hard to actually understand where that kind of thought process would come from, given that his situation at Roma when he left was one where he didn't think he was going to be playing significant minutes anymore. He didn't think he was going to be starting many games at Roma anymore. And he was in a situation where he thought the best thing for his career was to find a new club. Now then, fine, people might say, oh, well, he should have found another club in Europe. Well, it's not that easy, especially when your club wants $10 million US dollars for you. They're not going to let you go unless somebody's willing to pay for you. So the fact remains that Bradley was in a situation where he wasn't going to be playing as much as he needed to at Roma, and at the same time, they weren't going to let him go anywhere unless somebody came forward with the cash. And it just so happened the only people that came forward with the cash was Major League Soccer. So then it comes down to the measurement of, well, is it best for the player to stay in a European environment, or is it best for him to come over and play, big time minutes, everyday minutes with an MLS team? If you ask me, there's really no contest. You come over and you play the minutes and you compete on a regular basis, because training and playing in game environment and with that intensity is completely different. So has he regressed? I mean, I think that's the perception at the international level. Personally, I haven't seen a regression since he's arrived at Toronto FC, but the notion that he somehow took the easy way out to come to Major League Soccer is a bit of a joke to me.
When he first came over, there was confusion about what his role would be. He seems to have settled, at least at the TFC side. And if you watch the way he's been playing for the Americans in the Copa America as well, he seems to have settled into that number 6 role. Do you think that that's his long-term future, to play in front of the back line and do that kind of number 6 role?
I think so, because I think the more you're in and around that team and you're in and around players that are coaches that know Michael Bradley, I think that's the role he ultimately prefers. He's never really come out on record and said that he thinks he's a number 6 instead of a player who might play behind the strikers. But deep down, I think that's the position he knows suits him best. I think it's also a position that we've seen TFC have success with. I mean, the problem last year, of course, was while Bradley was creating a lot of chances, picking up assists, scoring the odd goal, TFC never really looked right when it was defending, because they'd always have an extra midfielder or two getting forward. So the team defends a lot better with Michael Bradley sitting in front of the back four, and I think his calmness and his distribution from that number 6 spot, as you said, has been a welcome addition to this year's team.
All right, turn our attention to another player, a U.S. international player that, of course, is injured right now, and a player that you talk a lot about in your daily job with the Sun there, and that's Jozy Altidore and the injury problems there. I agree with you that the work he does off the ball, what he does to support the rest of that offensive attack makes TFC a much different team, but I wonder at the same time whether he'll ever be healthy, whether he's just a guy, kind of like a Sergio Aguero that's just going to be hurt every year. And if that's the case, whether there's any way or whether TFC should consider moving on from him. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think they're going to let this this most recent injury play out with the hamstring. They're apparently attacking this one a lot different. I don't know how they're really doing that, because it seems like they probably should have already done that by now, given how many times he's injured this or both hamstrings. But they're apparently attacking this hamstring injury different and are confident that it's going to be rehabilitated and be okay. The question becomes is if he injures it again, then what happens? I mean, I think at a certain point, you're right. You do have no choice but to move on and approach Jozy and come to some kind of resolution. But as it stands, my lasting memory of Jozy Altidore right now is that game against Dallas, where he was all over the place and a complete difference maker, and really the big reason why they actually won that game. And a lot of people criticize that his lack of goal production, but personally, I think when TFC has all three of those designated players, Altidore, Giovinco, and Bradley on the field, I think they're the best team in the East. I also think it says something that Giovinco really, really, really likes to play with Jozy Altidore. That's kind of underreported and no one really talks about it. But him and Giovinco and Jozy actually have a pretty good relationship, and I know Sebastian loves to play with Jozy for obvious reasons. He takes a lot of the abuse and a lot of the beating away from Giovinco, and he benefits from it.
All right. With the caveat that when you left to go to France, TFC was probably at its lowest point. Since then, they've recovered with the Canadian Championship victory over Montreal and of course, the 1-0 victory this past weekend over the LA Galaxy. But just in your general observation, Kurt, do you think TFC's going in the right direction right now? Do you think they're happy with where they are right now?
I mean, I think they have to be happy given the 8-game road trip and whatnot. I think the LA Galaxy game was a big game. I didn't get a chance to watch it just because of the time difference, but I woke up and saw the result and was kind of pleasantly surprised given the absences TFC had. Of course, the LA Galaxy had absences too, but at the same time, TFC dug out a result, which I think was big for them. So, we always knew the summer was going to be big for them after this road trip, and the way I left it was with them on a downward slide, and that New York game where they got blown out. This has been, I guess, a positive rebound after the Copa break.
All right, what's up for you in France in the next few days?
Right now, I'm at the media center at Parc des Princes, where PSG plays. No sighting of Zlatan Ibrahimovic around here today, but no, it's going to be Germany, Northern Ireland, and I'm really looking forward to this one just because of the storylines. Can Germany, right the ship and find its attacking flair again? And then on the other side, it's can Northern Ireland continue its kind of dream run and pull off a result that would get them through to the next phase. So, a lot to go here, a long way to go, but so far so good.
All right, Kurt Larson, Toronto Sun, we thank you for your time as always, and enjoy your time in France.
All right, man. Thanks.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Your show number. Goodbye. Kevin, you were talking about 5 rings live during the Olympics.
Yes.
As the days go on, I
I continue to hope that I won't be talking about Zika and bankruptcy and doping for the entire 2 weeks.
Well, I got some sad news for you, Duane, because that's pretty much the way it's going to look like.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about England-Wales yesterday. I had both those games up at the same time. The England game on my big screen, although I could use a bigger screen if people want to give us Patreon donations. I'm kidding, sort of. I had the Wales game on my computer, and I'm sort of, by the end of the day, was far more interested in that Welsh game than I was in the England game, which turned out to be a bit of a dud, eh?
Actually, it was a 0-0 draw. Both teams were going to move on with a draw. So, yeah, exactly. It was a little bit of a dud. It wasn't the best performance by both teams. And unfortunately, fortunately for England, they moved on with this performance, not Slovakia.
Yeah, well, Slovakia could go back and is one of the best thirds, and that was probably pretty much what makes this a dud. I mean, they just needed the draw, right? So right now, if you look at the best third place finishers, anyone with 4 points, I think, is likely to go in. Albania, I think, is in trouble with only 3 as a third place finisher in that Group A, and then you look at the group that plays with Sweden in it, and it looks like with those teams, it's hard to see the Sweden and Ireland. It's hard to see either one of them winning their final game. So I suspect that will be the other group that doesn't have the third place advancer coming through it. So that'll be interesting. What came out of the England game, though, however, is that there's a real chance that it could be Portugal in the knockout stage. And that has made a lot of English fans a little bit nervous about the potential of playing Cristiano Ronaldo in the knockouts. Although Portugal hasn't really had much bite in this tournament, but as Kurt said in the interview, you never know when Ronaldo's going to break forward and get some finishing to go along with his great play so far, Kevin.
Exactly. He was close, very, very close, like inch close with a penalty, with a foot close with a shot in the first half. Ronaldo was close in both games for Portugal, but wasn't able to finish, wasn't able to get his team the results they needed, and now they desperately need a result. Otherwise, they could finish third, or they could even be knocked out if they lose, and it's quite a possibility as well.
Yeah. Look, the other game yesterday, the Welsh game, and I just want to talk with Gareth Bale a little bit. And as in the preview for this, I'll owe up to when I'm wrong in the previews. I have with Hungary. I with Wales as well. I thought they were fourth in the group. That was based on how they were playing leading up to this tournament. They got smoked 3-0 by Sweden, a team that has looked absolutely awful in their last game before the Euro. So it's hard to argue that anyone really saw it. But Gareth Bale has stepped up and has been the one superstar in this tournament that has truly delivered so far, and that has to be a bit of a surprise. I asked Kurt whether he thought Wales had the potential to maybe be a Greece, to maybe do something really special. I don't know if there's a Greece in this, but certainly making a semifinal or something like that for a team of Wales size would be incredible. I don't know. I'm beginning to buy into this Welsh hype train right now, especially if Bale continues to play the way he is, Kevin.
Yes, to be fair, the opposition is just going to become harder and harder for Wales, and on top of that, tactically, it's going to become even harder for Bale to find the space to be effective, because other team will focus on him even more than the teams he faced in the group stage. So that's the one worry I do have against Wales is, look, if somebody figures out tactically how to isolate Bale, it's going to become a very hard task to score goals for Wales.
Yeah. Last thought on England. Normally, the English drive a lot of the narrative of these tournaments. For some reason, this English team hasn't necessarily been grabbing the headlines, grabbing the attention the way that other English teams have. I'm not sure what that means exactly. It's just kind of an observation that I'm having here. You did actually go watch the England game out at a pub yesterday. Yes. What was the atmosphere like in Montreal for that?
It was pretty. It's still a weekday in Montreal. It was a Monday. It wasn't packed like it would be example of a semifinal of a final with England involved. It was a great atmosphere. I went to an authentic English pub, Burgundy Line, not to mention it. And yeah, great food, great beer, typical English atmosphere on the table filled with Englishmen from the old country, and just conversation were awesome. We had not a great game, but at least the experience was great.
All right. Well, fair enough. At least the experience was good. Did you have, the Wales game wasn't on there at all? There was no Welsh fans there?
Nope,
okay.
Not at all. There was one Russia guy that was wanting to watch the game, but he figured out very, very quickly that nobody wanted him there. And not just that, nobody wanted to see the Russia games.
All right. Fair enough. Speaking of Russia, look, is anyone shedding any tears outside of maybe in Russia that this team is out of this tournament? They didn't really ever perform at any level that was worthwhile on the pitch, and then their fans who allegedly, there's reports in France today, as Kurt mentioned, that said that 300 or so of them were allegedly stopped on the way to try and raise more trouble with England. So it's good to see them gone, I would have to say. And, their brother in Ukraine didn't add much to the equation either, because they have some of the same elements there. You hate to cheer against a team simply because their fans are bad, but in Russia's case, their fans are so bad that you kind of had to cheer against the Russian in this tournament.
Yeah, a little bit, absolutely. And now that Russia is knocked out, it's going to be an interesting time in Russian football, because they have 2 years to fix everything from the pitch to the stands to the fans before they welcome the world in 2 years.
Yeah. Well, what's being reported there is that they're just dead broke, right? And they're not paying their manager. Their manager's getting bonuses only. So basically he was there for free for the month, or not even the month, for the 2 weeks or so that it is. And I think when you see a lackluster performance like that, it probably reflects on that these players are probably getting bare basics and bare bones in terms of what they're getting provided in food and per diems and whatever else is out there. They're not getting, most teams get not a salary, but bonuses for wins and so forth. And they're probably just not getting the same thing. And the performance is matching that. So how do you turn this around in 2 years? That is an interesting question, especially when you have other political aspects and political turmoil and just uncertainty in that country, and the athletic organization completely under fire for the doping in other sports. I don't know. It seems pretty. We always are talking about Qatar in terms of them being all the problem and the problematic pick for the World Cup, but it's turning as it gets closer to 2018. It's looking more and more like that was the one that was truly the poor call by FIFA.
It actually really is. And just what we have seen in the Euro this year is just the tip of the iceberg as well. If we could be a little fly on the wall and see really what's going on, maybe we would have a lot of red flags raised.
Yeah, I asked a poll question last week whether, if your team was involved, it was one of the questions of the day, whether or not you'd travel to Russia. And it was overwhelming how many people said no. And now, I don't know, when the push came to shove, whether or not if Canada were in it, I think that I would go out of my way to try and get there. I'm not a typical traveler, though. I'm not sure you'd get the big numbers. I could see at the way things are going right now, I could see empty seats in that stadium for a World Cup, and that's just not something we're used to seeing recently. It was the norm back in the day. World Cups didn't necessarily sell out every game until probably 94. That's one of the arguments for bringing it back to the USA. And, full disclosure, we have another bid we're supporting for 26, but nonetheless, we'll leave that well enough alone. It doesn't seem like it's possible to get this over. Now, that said, these big organizations tend to figure it out during the game. And anyone who was at Sochi said that inside the Olympic bubble at Sochi could have been Disney World. I heard that on the radio the other day. Can they do the same thing for a World Cup, Kevin? It's more complicated. Lots of work to be done there.
Not just that, what you mentioned earlier last week, how a World Cup, when you travel to a World Cup, you're not necessarily confined to one area. You have to travel from stadium to stadium, from practice to other places. You're actually in the country, compared to an Olympic, where you can be literally confined to one city, one area, and everything you see is kind of for show. It's kind of different for a World Cup.
Yeah. If you've ever been to an Olympic city, I was in Atlanta just after, and it's pretty obvious that the Olympics are contained very much into one area, and then the rest of the city kind of goes about its normal business. Even the Pan Ams here in Toronto last year, if you weren't within 3 blocks of a Pan Am venue, you didn't know the Pan Ams were in the city. But if you were in those 3 blocks, it was all you saw, and it was you were in this wonderful little zone. And that's like, I see that here all the time with people in the city that still are kind of sour about those games that never took the time to experience them. If you took the time to experience them, you had a great time down in the area, but it should be the same thing. And anyway, it's going to be much more difficult. I think that it's going to almost be impossible to have like the FIFA fan zones and things like that have become a staple of World Cups are going to be very difficult unless they can get this ultra problem under control, Kevin.
Yes, wow, yeah, that could be very, very dangerous and quite unfortunate spectacle. If what the images I have in my hand of basically what happened in the Stand England versus Russia, but with a fan zone, yeah, that's not going to be pretty.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll come back and we'll wrap the show up with a little MLS talk.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Give us a call. Studio line 778-400-SPN1. That's 778-400-SPN1. Give us a call right now. Lines are open. And we are back on Soccer Today. Duane, MLS, it's back. And tonight as well, the Voyageurs Cup, quite an eventful week in soccer. It's actually kind of crazy.
We'll have some post-game coverage of that for later in the week, and we'll probably get a little bit in the show as well. We gave the U.S. Open Cup some coverage, so we'll do the Voyageurs Cup too. Later on today, we're not sure exactly when the timing of this is, or it might be even earlier tomorrow. We apologize for that, but we have lots of other things that we're trying to get out at the same time. Yes. We will get a Two Solitudes out that has already been mostly recorded with Daniel Squizzato of MLSsoccer.com. He and I had a close to 45-minute conversation about the Canadian women's national team lineup for the Olympics. A very involved conversation about women's soccer. For those that have followed both of us for a long time know that we both covered the women here in Canada for a very long time. So I'd like to think that we added some insight to this roster and some of the decisions that are happening right now around that program. So I encourage you to listen to that. That's especially for our domestic fans out there that are listening to Soccer Today, and we thank you for that, we will continue to endeavor to give you great interviews like we did with Daniel there to keep you up to date on your Canadian soccer. But let's turn to MLS. There was one trade that had a bit of a Canadian hook, actually. Dilly Duca, who played for the Impact for a couple of years, was sort of traded. It's one of those MLS things. He was gam-tammed and second-round picked for his rights, and then Columbus went and signed him. You liked Duca as a player. What happened to him in Montreal?
Well, he was in Montreal. He wanted to probably broaden his horizon after last year. He didn't see necessarily his place coming into the team with the other roster movement and with the Piatti moving on the side and all that. So he was trying to find a place to play abroad, like you were mentioning earlier, trying to find another spot. And once he couldn't get a roster spot in Europe or somewhere else, he's coming back home, and the Crew is going to be his destination. And for the Impact, you mentioned, it's still quite a big price. They have some draft choices as well as a Gam and Tam. So, it's quite a addition for the Impact for, not an addition, but the price that Columbus paid is pretty high for a player that hasn't played for Montreal in 2016 at all, that was already gone. And in a way, we were expecting him to be gone for nothing. Montreal still gets something, so it's impressive that way.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what the GAM-TAM is. For those that don't know, if you're new to this, it's general allocation money and targeted allocation money, and we probably need to have a whole show where we do nothing but explain these terms to people that we then pin to the top of our account. But at any rate, the allocation money, they got money for him basically in a second-round pick. Yes. The second-round pick, that's a dart, But nonetheless, it's better to have more darts than less. So good for that. And as you said, he wasn't really playing. Well, he wasn't playing at all for Montreal and had some limited times at the end of the last year. Well, just quickly for any Columbus fans that might be listening, what kind of player? They should know him because he's been there before. But if they're new, what kind of player is Duca?
Very good to cross the ball in. He's actually very useful too when he decides to cross in himself and take the space when the space is available to be able to shot from outside the box to the net. Was able to score a couple of important goals for Montreal. Look in Pachuca, he was the one who scored those 2 goals. Dilly Duca became to fruition back then. But yes, exactly. It's that type of player, that grit, American veteran, be able to bring an MLSer lifer like we like to call them here. They brings something to the team, that intangible, the knowledge of the team, knowledge of the players, and that is the presence that he brings to the team. And he is now an experienced veteran. Yes, it's an oxymoron, I know, but he is experienced. So for him, he's going to help maybe this team move on to a tumultuous few weeks they had.
And is it the best name in Major League Soccer?
Deliver Duca? Absolutely, it is, for sure.
Okay. Dilly Duca. It's fun to say. Dilly Duca. Dilly Duca. Yeah, it's fun to
say.
Dilly.
Oh, Dilly.
Dilly. I like dill pickles. Man, I want a pickle for lunch now. All right.
No, I'm not a fan of pickles. They're disgusting.
Oh, you don't know what you're missing. A nice little, little garlic pickle action there. That's all good to go. Did it dip it into tzatziki? Gets a double cucumber action there.
Yeah, no, not a fan. Not at all. No.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
I'll stick with my cheese sticks.
Sound like I'm pregnant.
All right.
Ice cream. Maybe my profile might make me look like I'm pregnant too. I'll be here all week. Tip your waiter. I will be here all week.
Too bad I didn't have my soundboard ready. I would have.
I get the drum roll. There we go. All right. Speaking of 70,000 tickets sold for the U.S. Argentina tonight. That should be pretty fun. Well, what do you think the crowd makeup will be? Do you think it'll be mostly U.S. fans, or do you think there'll be a mix in there, or mostly Argentina? What's your thoughts there, Kevin?
There will definitely be a contingent of Argentina fans, but it has to be mainly American. We'll see. The amount of tickets were sold maybe a long time ago, so Argentina were maybe more expecting to be that in the States, so maybe that will explain the composition of the fans. But if I could venture a wild guess, at least 70% American. Has to be at least.
Yeah, it's good. And this is one of the things that, here in Canada, we have the debates all the time about, what kind of the crowd makeup is going to be. And certainly we worry about that stuff. The same thing happens in the States, and especially when Mexico plays. But nonetheless, I think that the American audience growth over the past 10 years has been one of the most remarkable things that I have seen in soccer, that they now have such a passionate and vocal support. Some of those viewing parties that I saw, video of during 2014 were just incredible. And they made me a little jealous, to be honest, with the American Outlaws and how they've managed to galvanize support across the country. So I anticipate that 70,000, as you said, there'll be a contingency of Argentina fans there, of just Messi fans there. That's not to, in a place like North America, which is so multinational, multicultural, it's hard to avoid that. But I suspect that 50, 60,000 of that 70,000 will be wearing, the red, white, and blue. And that's good for American soccer. And it has a lot to do with just Major League Soccer too. Like I talked about AO, but I think the MLS and the supporters groups play a big role in that. And 20 years in now, it's just part of the culture. There's a generation that has grown up thinking of that this is just perfectly normal to go out and support national teams and to support local game.
Exactly. And, you mentioned American Outlaws, and we have to be honest, too. American Outlaws is comprised of supporters from every team in MLS that accepts the role that they can bring to an American Outlaw division in their team. It doesn't matter which supporter section you are in the same city. They bring on the American Outlaws color and support their national team when it's time to do so. And that is very impressive to the scale that they have done it in North America. I wouldn't have imagined that a decade ago. And that's how far they have gone. To see the support that the U.S. did have this year, it was quite amazing and quite shocking to see the size of the crowds and the involvement of the crowd as well.
Of course, not every American fan is a Major League Soccer fan, and we talked about Soccer Wars earlier on today. You got to imagine when I say Soccer Wars, it's all in caps, all together with a Z in the end, or a Z in the end, pardon me. Depends on what country you're talking in. That's how you say Soccer Wars. All right. Anyway, not everyone cheers for MLS. And that's a segue into my final topic of the day. And that's Peter Wilt announcing to the public that it looks like it'll be no earlier than 2018 for a Chicago team in NASL. This is a topic that has been on the NASL nightcap, has dealt with it in detail on the network. But for those who don't know, Peter Wilt left the Indy 11 to try and create a Chicago NASL team to be a natural competitor against the Fire in that market. One of the big components of his vision is to ensure that the stadium that they play in is in the actual city of Toronto.
Chicago, yes. Toronto already has.
Did I say Toronto?
Yes,
sorry, Chicago. Yeah, I'm in Toronto. It's in my mind anyway. No, Chicago. Pardon me. I've talked to Peter Wilt before about that. I think that the stadium, Chicago Stadium, is brilliant. It's a beautiful stadium, but he regrets that they chose to build it where they did, and think that that's really one of the major things holding back that franchise. So the reason they're holding off to 2018 is they can't find a venue to play in that's in the city of Toronto, and it illustrates. City of Toronto did it again. City of Chicago. It illustrates how difficult it is to find stadium sites in urban centers. Miami is the same issue, Kevin.
Well, New York as well. Just New York. Exactly. But when you're looking at the situation in Chicago, a month and a half ago when Peter Wilt was on our show here and was on the Nightcap, he mentioned that it was getting close to crunch time for 2017 because you do need to put in place infrastructures, personnel, ticket sales, marketing, all that. And you have to start it now if you want to be playing in 2017. And the time was passing and no news. So we were expecting that type of news from Peter Wilt, and the fact that he just finished his job with the Indy 11 a week and a half ago was his last day when it was the derby between Indy 11 and Chicago in the U.S. Open Cup. It was fitting. It was his last day of work too for Indy. So it's kind of all the things fell into the right place, and he just moves the transition from team to team almost on the stadium. But for him now with Chicago and ASL, he is going to try to bring that vision of city soccer, the vision of, look, we have a team that can battle it. And yes, it's in the NSL. Who knows about the future? And that's what's interesting about this conversation too. They're delaying it by a year because 2017 was their original goal. Let's not forget that. So by the 1 year delay, maybe they'll have a chance to lay the grassroots correctly, or we'll see if there's other roadblocks for them. It's going to be interesting the next year for the Chicago NSL project.
Yeah, I was reading some Chicago opinion on this. One of the things that they mentioned as a roadblock for this team is the lack of like top level 1A football programs. That I'm talking about gridiron football programs in the city of Chicago proper. The universities in that area don't necessarily have that same kind of athletic tradition that other cities might have. So they can't just, use a football stadium temporarily while they look for a soccer specific venue if that's their long-term goal. So they, are really stuck with maybe looking at the baseball stadiums, and we've seen how bad that is in New York. And you're going to add, that's going to be even doubled when you're talking about an NASL team, because that's, let's be honest here, folks. The average attendance in the NASL is around 8,000. So that's not average. That's a high level attendance is around 8,000. Yes. That's going to look terrible in Wrigley Field or what's Kaminsky called now? I forget. Whatever the White Sox do.
Soldier Field, and the other one doesn't.
Where the White Sox play.
The White Sox is Soldier Field, and you have the Wrigley Field.
Yeah, no, Soldier Field's the Bears. But at any rate, it doesn't matter so much. These are huge stadiums, is the point, right? And you're going to need a more intimate venue, and it just illustrates the problem. I've had doubts about this Chicago. Look, I like anyone that follows North American soccer that has talked about North American soccer for any time. I have a lot of time for Peter Wilt, but I've always had a little bit of a doubt about this project. I just don't know whether they're going to be able to find the stadium or whether they're going to be able to find a market. And I'm not too sure whether I'm out to lunch on that or not. I don't know, Kevin.
The jury's still out on this. Whenever I talk to Peter Wilt about this project, I always have the feeling that, yes, the idea is amazing. Maybe the end goal is not necessarily what we're seeing. There's always here them speculating. So I'll be honest about it. But who knows? Maybe there's a new type of crops of owners. They have money. They buy out the fire, move it back to somewhere in the city, and you got yourself a different conversation. There's a lot of possibilities with this project. So as much as I have to agree with you, I don't necessarily see the viability long-term to this project now. There is a supporters faction already started in the market that are very involved, and there's a supporters trust involved now as well back on the table. So that will be interesting, that aspect, because it would be a first in North America. So there's that aspect we have to always keep an eye out to.
One of the things that fascinates me about this project too, as it relates to all of Major League Soccer's markets, is whether the NASL could find a market within a Major League Soccer market, whether the soccer strength of the sport has grown to the point now that the big cities in North America could support two teams. And I think about my own market. I think about similar markets to this, and Seattle, even places like that. And I wonder, are there enough people out there that are disenfranchised by Major League Soccer? And those people exist, as we've talked about before. Put all the jokes aside, they do exist. And is that number big enough to support second teams in markets. And while big markets, North American markets, understand the value in supporting quote unquote Division II or minor league teams, because traditionally speaking, large markets have struggled with that, have struggled beyond the most dedicated hardcore of the fans, because they view it as either a farm team, which the NASL is not, we understand, or they view it as not worthy, because why would you support the second best when the best is in town? And that's a major mental roadblock that they are going to have to overcome, the NASL, if they're going to go into these markets that have MLS teams amongst what we would call general audience fans that they absolutely need to attract. Because my opinion is that the anti-MLS folks, they're not big enough in numbers to support a franchise. That's my position on that.
Yep, makes a lot of sense, Dwayne.
All right. I think we're running out of steam, Kevin.
And we're already over. So thanks to everybody listening. You are listening to Soccer Day. You can visit us on sportspodcastnetwork.com. Duane Rollins on Twitter at 24th Minute. Myself at Kev Laramee. And most importantly, the network at SportsPodNet. You would like to help us achieve our vision, help us continue our growth. Patreon.com. That's patreon.com/sportspodcasting network. With your help, we are able to provide you the live coverage that we have been doing for the last 3 weeks. But to continue this venture, we do need your help. So go to patreon.com/sportspodcasting network. For Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. Until tomorrow, 11 a.m. for Soccer Today. Well, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.